Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're joining us from. And welcome to this edition of the IABC Virtual Talk Series powered by IABC West Africa Interest Group. And it is my pleasure to be here as your facilitator, your host for the event. My name is Emeka Abai, and I'll be guiding you through, I'll be moderating today's event. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you, appreciate the things that our able panelists will be offering you. It's going to be a very interactive session, so we hope that you will also drop your comments in the chat box, and of course, join in the conversation by throwing questions and all that. But for now, let's talk about our hosts, the IABC. The IABC, as we may know, is an association of business communicators from all over the world. We have members everywhere in the world, and the essence of this organization is business communication, essentially, from A to Z of business communication. The group exists to help you, become better communicator. The IABC, as you can see, we have beautiful men and women as members, and you get to have your career aspirations broadened and enriched by being a member of this organization. The West Africa Interest Group is just a part of the IABC International. So, and that's it. We look forward to having you join us soon as a member of the organization. And there are ways to become members. You can, if you look through the slide on your screen, you will see the link below. You just click on that link, or after now, you can ask any of the members, connect with any of the members you see, connect with any of them, and then they can lead you through ways of becoming a member of the organization. Again, on the screen, you have the team leads for the West Africa Interest Group. Any of them will be available and willing to help you join the IABC. You're welcome, truly welcome. On the screen, you have our Twitter handles, LinkedIn, YouTube channel, and so on. So we are on social media, so please join us on social media, share with us, tag us, carry us along, and all that. For this event, we have a very eminent panel of speakers who will be discussing the topic from reactive to responsive communication. What does it mean for communication leadership? What does it mean for organizations, for individuals, for companies, and so on and so forth? So I'll begin by introducing Adedoyin Jaesimi. She is the co-founder of the Comms Avenue. Though you may wish to say hello to our audience.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Welcome. And next is Godfrey Adejumo. Godfrey is the head of corporate affairs and sustainable development, sustainable business at Unilever, West Africa. Godfrey, please say hello to the audience.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And finally, we also have Njideka Abo, who is a principal consultant at Glan Media Consult. Njideka, please put on your camera and say hello to our audience.
Hello, everyone.
So thank you. We look forward. So that's the panelists we have for this event. Now, I will not, of course, I've not read their long bios because of time, but they were there on screen, and you can also connect, on LinkedIn to see what they have on offer. But for now, we are going to take photographs. So please, may I ask the panelists to put on their cameras and keep them on for the moment, and let's take a photo for the social media and for promoting IABC, of course, promoting this event as the case may be. At the count of 3, I presume the cameras would have rolled. So a silent count of 3, and then we move on. You may wish to smile. You're looking too serious. Thank you. Okay. So technical team, I presume we can make progress. Thank you. Excellent. So dear participants, this webinar has been recorded, and so we thank you for your permission for us to record this seminar. It will be available also on YouTube channel immediately the session is over. So thank you for your permission to record. Now, today we are discussing, like I said earlier, communication leadership, from reactive to responsive communication. What does it really mean? What does communication leadership really mean? We are talking about communication that is seamless, that is also proactive. But what we do at the moment is reactive communication, what most of us do anyway. Even as parents, let's just begin from that home front. As parents and siblings, you find yourself reacting to what a perceived wrongdoing. You've done this to me, you've done that, and so on and so forth. And this leads to tension, of course, in families, in associations, in organizations, and so on. And with companies, with stakeholder relationship, if you don't manage your stakeholders early enough, what happens is you have a crisis on your hands. So we are talking about being able to manage stakeholders, being able to communicate proactively without waiting for an issue to arise before you begin to address the issue, before you go into firefighting mode. When you communicate proactively, you carry your audience along, you have your stakeholders with you, you engender trust, confidence, reliability, and all that, So this is about being adaptable to communication needs. And that's the essence of today's webinar. We hope that by the end of the day, we would have picked up a few tools from our panelists on what we can do to ensure communication leadership. We'd also have looked at metrics for measuring what we've done, how effective have we been with our communication, all that will come through. We're also looking forward to interacting with you, with the participants. We look to receiving questions from you, which will go to the panelists, and they in turn will share their insights on your questions. We also look forward to having your comments, which will then enrich everybody's knowledge, in this session. So please drop your comments on the comment box. That's okay, that's beautiful. But let us also have your your questions in the Q&A box so that I can easily pick it up for our panelists to attend to that. We have a pre-recorded, not recorded, pre-written questions already for our panelists. We begin from there and then, get into your own questions as our participants. So we'll begin by giving 2 minutes each to the panelists to hear their thoughts on what communication leadership is and what it isn't about. What is reactive communication? What is responsive communication? Why should we be responsive and responsible in our communication? Because responsive communication is about responsibility. It's about being responsible. You are able to respond in good time without waiting for crisis. So in no particular order, I'll begin with Adedoyin. In 2 minutes, Adedoyin, could you share with us what it means for you to be reactive or responsive in communication and what communication leadership means for you?
Thank you very much, Emeka, and good afternoon again, everyone. It's a joy to be here. To your question, for me, I really believe it's all about thinking end to end about what it is that you want to say, what it is that you want to do, and making sure that all the stakeholders are carried along and well informed. When something is reactive, it feels like it just came out of the blue. And a lot of times when we see reactive communication, if someone had done some foresight scenario planning, they would have been able to understand these scenarios, what would have happened. So for me, it's about being proactive. It's about thinking about what information do I need to put out? How do I need to carry people along to avoid confusion, and making sure that everybody is on the same page in alignment with what the organization wants to say and what the organization stands for.
Yeah, thank you, Adedoyin. I hear for scenario planning, I hear things about information we need to put out. I hear the word alignment. How do we align what we want to say with the organization's goals and vision and the issue at hand? So thank you so much for that. And all this will come to play, of course, as we discuss the topic further. Let's hear from Godfrey. Godfrey, what does reactive communication and responsive communication mean to you? What does it mean when we talk about communication leadership? What comes to mind?
Okay, thank you, everyone, and thanks, Adedoyin, for starting the conversation. I like to break things down in ABC. You will hear the common saying that accidents don't just happen. A lot of times when there's an accident, major or minor, there's a lot of blame game to say, oh, that and this. But most time, the truth is scientifically proven and otherwise, accidents don't just happen. Before you set out on your journey, do you check your vehicle? Are your brakes intact? Are your common safety measures intact? Also, understand the road you're applying. If it's an express road like the newly constructed Third Mainland Bridge, the now very nice Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, you can't be on those kind of route and not drive safely. So reactive communication is when you set out on a journey and you do not check the condition of your vehicles. And so when something happens, there's an accident, you are all over the place. But responsive communication is you doing a proper check. I'm traveling next month. Has this car been serviced? What is it that I need? What road am I taking? What is the best time to set out on the journey? You need to be calculative. You need to be intuitive. You need to be very calm in your approach. So I'll say reactive communication is more like not planning for your journey to travel distance A to B safely. And responsive communication is when you take your time to plan your journey. You understand yourself, you understand your vehicle, you understand the road you're going to travel on, and your journey is safe.
Thank you. Thank you, Godfrey. I like the allusion to the road. When you say understand the road you're applying. For me, what comes to mind is that the road, the journey is a process that has a beginning and an end. And if you bring that to the corporate organization, you're talking about the fact that as a communicator, you should know your organization very well, know what the issues are, know where the problems lie or where the problems may be, So in that, it gives you the knowledge, gives you the power to be able to predict to some degree that there could be an issue here or an issue there, and then you prepare in good time, which is a responsibility to then begin to manage that thing before it even happens. So we are going to plan our journey. That is what I get from you. And that to be responsible and responsive in our communication. Thank you so much. Njideka, I will come to you. Let's hear what you think about responsive communication, reactive communication. Let's also hear what you think about communication leadership. Thank you.
So I mean, Adedoyin and the other panelists has already spoken, has already said quite a lot about what I would have said. But I just quickly want to add that there was something that Stephen Covey said. He said that a lot of times it's difficult to talk yourself out of an issue that you behaved yourself into. And I quite agree with that because that's what, to me, reactive communication.
I'm not sure it's just me, but I can't hear. I can't hear Angelica.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
It's very faint.
Oh.
But go ahead. Let's see if it's better.
Okay. So responsive communication to me really is you being proactive about your plans. A lot of times, like you said, you can't predict the crisis that you might have in the future. So it's something that you can definitely plan for. So that's what it is.
Yeah, Njideka. Sorry, I really can't hear you, and I want to believe that exactly we cannot hear Njideka, very faint. So let's hope you will attend to that, while I move on to the other panelists. But the much I could hear from you was about Stephen Covey, and he's saying that it's tough for us to get ourselves out of situations that we behaved ourselves into. And I love that expression. When he said that, what came to my mind was is the fact that some people, talk about health and illnesses. Some of us don't know that the very serious illnesses like diabetes and the rest take a long time to come. It's not something that happens overnight. And so with communication too, the issues that we need to address most times don't happen just overnight. There are circumstances, situations that would have been building up to that or to those issues that if we had caught on time, we would have been, this responsive communication we're talking about, we would have been able to maybe not address the situation, but at least manage it very well when it arises, which is what being responsive is all about. So thank you so much. We will move straight into the session now that we have your initial thoughts on what the topic entails. I'll begin with Doi, but before I get at the Doi, I want to point out that this will run from looking at shifting paradigms, which is what it means to move from reactive to responsive. We'll be looking through there. We'll also be looking at building impactful narratives and relationships and the power of dialogue and all that. The idea is to get to all the possible parts or issues or ramifications of this topic so that we are all enriched by our participation in this session. So let's begin with Adedoyin, like I said. Adedoyin, stakeholder engagement, beyond crisis response, how can communication leaders proactively engage stakeholders to build trust and foster collaboration? We're looking at channels and platforms, if it's possible, that are most effective for these kinds of interactions. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Emeka. So trust is something that I've been doing a lot of studying and research on because there's academic research on trust as a dimension. And trust is at the heart of every organization's operations, performance, and existence. Because when there's trust, there's also license to operate. And that's where we come in as communications experts and professionals. Because if you lose that trust, you literally lose the license to operate. So what that means in terms of stakeholder management is that there needs to be a proactive approach to understanding what their needs are and their priorities are. And thankfully, we have a very lovely stakeholder framework that allows us to map our stakeholders. I see a lot of organizations making assumptions about their stakeholders or trying to use a one-size-fits approach for every stakeholder. So I cannot come and tell you that, oh, social media is the best way to communicate with this particular stakeholder because I don't know what buckets they fit into. When you do your mapping, you would see, okay, is this stakeholder one that I need to keep satisfied? Or closely monitor those two people, you can't be communicating with them on social media. For example, the person that you need to keep satisfied needs regular information, or the person that you need to anticipate their needs or even manage closely. So you need to do that segmentation and look at the most appropriate channels to be able to communicate with them and see what their needs are, what their response is, and how they're taking on board what you are saying. And then that means that there also needs to be constant communication that is in alignment with the organization's priorities, because sometimes you may want to just go overboard with satisfying your stakeholders. You must remember that it cannot be to the detriment of why this organization exists. So there needs to be a middle point. And if I can just add something to just wrap that up, is also implementing a mechanism of feedback. You build trust when you're able to listen. You build trust when your stakeholders feel carried along, they feel they're being heard, and you cannot do that without receiving feedback. So feedback helps you go back to the drawing board to reiterate and say, okay, maybe this needs to change. Maybe we need to do this. Maybe we need to project X over Y, but that needs to be done through listening. So more of the listening, more of the stakeholder mapping, and then channeling your communication and your engagement based on whatever those stakeholder groups need.
Thank you so much,
I'd
Adedoyin.
like to add to that. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, please. I can hear you very well now.
Okay, thank you. So I'd just like to say that previously, people could just, communication leaders could just say, oh, I apologize and move on with that. But right now, the stakeholders demand more. So they want you to not just acknowledge the challenge, but also give assurances that you're working on a long-term plan so that this will not happen again. So they are asking you to communicate, what did you do, explicitly communicate, the steps that you're taking. So when you found out that this issue happened, what did you do? What measures are you taking to ensure that it doesn't happen again? And what other plans are you taking for the long term? So those are
Thank you.
essential that will help you trust.
Okay. Thank you, Njideka. Now, from Adedoyin, I hear that it's key to segment your audience, your stakeholders, and then from that segmentation, you can then decide which channel works best for you. So there is no one size fits all when it comes to channels for communication, and that's brilliant. And I also hear that you need to build trust by communicating, by listening. When you listen and implement and show that you've listened, people begin to tell themselves, okay, that's a listening organization, and then you can build trust along the line. And from JDEC, I hear that stakeholders are demanding more each minute. We're in a new world where there is a surfeit of information. So people are asking for more and more and more responsibility from companies and so on. So we need to talk to our stakeholders in a way that they appreciate that we are listening, which ties into what are they doing, also said earlier about feedback. So when you get that feedback, you need to show by your actions and your communication, detailed as you said, that we are listening. So Godfrey, I will not ask you about this because it's been fairly well attended to, but I will ask you, in what ways has the role of communication evolved in driving organizational transformation? How can communication leaders campaign, how can communication leaders champion change by aligning their message with the goals of the organization?
Okay, thank you, Prof, for that question. There are simple steps to take, and it begins from you as a person. I hope you can hear me. I would say that the first steps you can take is remember that every organization has its own purpose, objective, and a lot of things, internal dynamics, and what do they want to achieve. So you as a communication person in that setting, you need to first of all understand the operations of where you work. And I speak from experience to say, no two organizations are the same. So you need to, first of all, internalize what do they do here? And a lot of times, people who are communications practitioners tend to distance themselves from the heart of the organization. The heart of the organization is everywhere, but there are core parts of the business that are critical. No business is out there for charity. Every business is there for profit. So you've got maybe the marketing, the sales, the finance, the supply chain, the manufacturing. You need to, as a communication practitioner, understand and immerse yourself in all of these. Are there internal lingos? Are there internal bureaucracies? Embrace all of that, because the more you become the organization, the more you are trusted as an advisor in the system. So, and even your solutions in terms of advisory will be based on the standards of operation of the organization. So you cannot operate in a telecom sector and be advising and proposing solutions of FMCG to a telco organization. So you need to ensure that first, you understand what your place of work is about. Let me put it like that, place of work, so it doesn't become too ambiguous. When you understand it, then the other step is the business leaders, like Adedoyin said, stakeholders are not just external, they are also internal. As a matter of fact, it is first internal stakeholders before external stakeholders. What is the body language of the MD CEO? What is the body language of the board? What is the body language of the leadership team, the management team, the general employees? You must understand these nuances, these dynamics. They're in moving parts. They change every day. So when you understand all of this, it's like you have been able to dissect the problem of a patient. And as a doctor, you are now a communication doctor. So you'll be able to say, okay, I know where the problem is. It's a leg pain. This is what you need. It's chest pain. This is what you need. So at the end of the day, what you are doing is you are dimensioning your solution appropriately to what is needed, not textbook knowledge, not what you copy and paste, but what is the operational reality of your environment, and you propose solutions that fit. That way you are a trusted person. You are even called into the inner cycle where core decisions are made, because they see you like you understand the organization, and therefore no critical decisions should be taken without your input. And that way you also have the first-hand opportunity to advise them directly that, yes, for instance, we're going to make a lot of money from this, but after making the money, we might not be in the business in the next 5 to 10 years, which means we might not be sustainable. But have we made money? Yes, we have. But are we going to be sustainable? No, we won't. So you are that balancing and checkmate person that comes on board. So as I summarize, I'll say, please, by all means, understand the organizations you work in, understand the body language of the management team, the people who are the key decision makers, and even other parts of the organization, support employees and all of that. Understand them and use that to propose your advisory and solutions to them. That's my take on that, Prof.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So how can communication leaders champion change and then make sure that this change also, relates with the organization's goals? And Godfrey tells us that first, we need to understand our internal stakeholders, our internal audience. We need to know the company, we need to know the business. And this truly is a key challenge for most communicators. We don't understand that we don't live in isolation. Our job is not just communication. Let's go and say it out there. You first need to know, to even know what you are going to say. You need to know what it is that is the issue in-house, and then what to communicate to the audience outside or to the stakeholder outside. So that's the point that Godfrey is making here. We need to know our internal audience. We need to know the internal politics. We need to know the temperature of the organization. We need to know what the issues are, where to go to for solutions, and what solutions the company is proposing for its challenges, and so on and so forth. That is the only way we can be better communications. We need to align our communication with the organization's goals. So we need to know those goals in the first place. Thank you, Godfrey. I am going over to Njideka. Njideka, during crisis, what specific storytelling techniques resonate most with stakeholders from your opinion and from your experience? How can communication leaders craft narratives that evoke sympathy, evoke empathy and authenticity, and then, of course, move people to action, which is the end goal of all communication?
Okay, so I really like storytelling. And as a storyteller, what will work here really is called the story of us. So this was coined by Marshall Gantz. The story of us communicates, first of all, what our shared values are. So it communicates what our shared values are. So the organization has to look internally to find out what the values are, and then align that with the stakeholders. Then the next thing you have to do is to work on the shared experiences that you have. When you do those two things, and then you also communicate, this is why we do what we do, and this is who we are to you, this is who we consider ourselves to be to you. So when you do all of that, you're able to you're able to string, like an empathetic bridge that would make people even sit down at first to know what you're saying. And that will also help you build trust. Now, when you do that, then you can now go back to what he also calls the story of now. Now, now says that we have currently, we're in this together, but then we have a challenge that we want you to be aware of. We are transparent enough to communicate that this is the issue that we have. And this is, as now that there's a crisis, this is as much as we know, but we're working towards ensuring that we communicate everything, the measures that we are taking. And when you do all of that, you also try to also communicate hope, so that these people, the key stakeholders rather, to not just see that you're presenting a challenge to them, also telling them that something is definitely, things are definitely going to change for the better. And an example that I really like is Jacinda, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. When there was a crisis, that's at the Christchurch, she actually made a presentation, and then she said, I don't have the perfect words to tell you because I do not understand what I can say to let you know, because you are grieving and I'm not. But I do not have the perfect words to give you, but I understand what is happening to you. I understand that you are in an environment where there is peace, and this is even why the Muslim community even came here in the first place. But right now we're having an issue, and together we can work on fixing that. And even if it is not, even if, yes, the shared story, I can see Karen Sholank in the comments saying the shared story, yes. So even if we don't have the current solution to the crisis at the moment, we're definitely going to keep in the loop of what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Njideke. The story of us. What resonates, in what you said, what hit me is when you said we must or we should communicate hope. That's brilliant. Most of us think that when there's a crisis, it's you just say it as it is, spew it as it is, by which I mean you dampen people's spirits. No, we say the truth, which is what communication is about. Integrity is key, but communicate hope even as you do that. And when things are also going well for the organization and you're meeting stakeholders and all that, the key is to communicate. If you can, communicate hope, it's a deliberate effort. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. Now, Adedoyin, what strategies can communication leaders employ to map and understand their stakeholder landscape? We're looking at how one can tailor narratives to address specific issues or the unique needs and concerns of different groups of people. As we all know, each company, each organization has so many stakeholders. So how do we ensure that we craft our messages that, in a way to address these specific audiences and the specific needs that they have? Yeah, Adedoyin, go ahead.
Okay,
Let's tap into your experience. Go ahead.
So it still starts with the stakeholder framework that I said I spoke about previously, and that's really the starting point. And you have to do it internally and externally. Godfrey really explained the points that, look, you can't even afford to ignore your internal stakeholders. Now, when you then do that mapping, you then need to say, okay, what information do we need to pass across, and who is the right person to pass across this information? Because it's not every single time that a message must be passed by the CEO. There may be somebody else that has maybe more credibility or more acceptance than even the CEO of the organization. So when you sit down and do that mapping and understand, okay, what needs to be said, what kind of situation are we in? A lot of times we talk about crisis, but you find that some of these crises are just badly managed issues, the wrong spokesperson or the spokesperson saying the wrong thing to the wrong audience at the wrong time. And, we were talking about being transparent and being open. That doesn't mean that you say everything. It just means that you need to communicate just enough to either keep that stakeholder satisfied, or it lets them know that this organization is acting or taking action on something. So if you start with that foundation of the framework of that stakeholder mapping, then you can deal with the stakeholder. There's also the issue of timing, right? Who do we even communicate to first, especially when the crisis is a really, really urgent one? Who do we reach out to first, and how do we do that? So you really need to sit down, and it's not something you do haphazardly, because that's where it becomes responsive. You actually need to plan it and then monitor what is the response as we're putting out this message, who is the right person, what is their reception to it, what is the body language, what is the feedback that we're getting. So it's putting out the message, listening, reiterating it, putting it out, and it's a constant cycle till you get out of that phase of the crisis or whatever is happening.
Thank you. Constant cycle. That's the word. I went to the Q&A session. Njideka, did you want to say anything?
Yes, I just wanted to say something.
Please,
just
go
to
ahead.
add to that.
Please.
So, I have a media background, and I find it interesting that quite a number of times, we have communication leaders when we put out reports, rather, say, oh, they declined to comment, or we're not even available for comments. I would advise that as much as possible, people try not to have issues like that, because that way you're able to control the narrative. You're also able to know the direction that the media house or the reporter wants to take when writing the story. And you really want to be able to be the resource person that the media house can reference, because definitely they're also going to talk to maybe advocacy groups or maybe competitors, things like that. So you really want to ensure that while you're working on your crisis communication plan, that the media, you're trying to also put that in check somewhat, so that you don't have the situations of, oh, declined to comment, or was not even available for comment.
Thank you so much. This enriches, the talk. Remember, we are discussing, how we can move from reactive to responsive communication. And then we're also discussing not just the how, but why it is necessary, it is essential. Thank you so much. I went through the comment box, and I see a comment that, from Shola Abulu. She says that she thinks communicating hope is not just good for us to do, it is also something we must do internally, not just externally. And it's powerful for internal communications, because that's where you have people, you have a workforce that may not be as motivated as they ought to be, and which is where communicating hope would help everybody. So thank you for that, Shola. I see in the Q&A that we don't have any questions yet. So I want to remind our participants that we are co-creating this event. We are co-creating this discourse. So please, let's share your questions, and we'll pick them up here and throw to our panelists, and their responses would give us further insight into the need for us to take control, in terms of communication leadership, for us to show responsibility in terms of our communication, not just reacting, but being responsive, being there before it happens. Now, I remember most of us who are from Nigeria on this call would know that a certain company, a tomato company, has an issue in the public now. And for me, it's a question of it's a question of reactive communication. If they had taken some time or some things into account, maybe, just maybe, they might have nipped whatever is happening now in the board before it even blew or before it even grew, And then when it began, if they had also preempted how far this could go, they might have been able to communicate responsibly and, in a way that they will show that they have foreseen the problem, and then they are reacting to the problem from a future time. So with that in mind, I want to ask our friend Godfrey about transparency and trust. How can organizations leverage communication to build and maintain strong relationship with diverse stakeholders, especially during challenging times? Godfrey, let's hear your thoughts on this.
Okay, again, I'll keep it simple to say transparency and building trust is simply put when you say and do, when you do what you say. It is very simple. And as it were, we're not in a perfect world. And I am not an advocate of perfection. I'm an advocate of being progressive and making the effort to do your best and be very honest about that. You make a commitment in public, you make a pronouncement, you give a timeline, you give your processes of how you will do that, and you go back periodically to say, this is where we are on the pronouncement and the commitment we made. We have fallen short. We haven't met our target. There's no shame in that. People don't really understand that. There's no shame in that, because that's why we are humans. We build target, we build aspirations to meet them. Not all the times do we meet them, but what matters is how you are carrying people along. And it transcends in all spheres of operations. Some organizations are service providers. Some organizations have physical, tangible products. So the question is, whichever sphere you find yourself as a business, whether you're a service provider, your commitment through your ads, do people experience those claims that you make? In your product, if you're a physical product organization, when people pick it up from the shelf, do they feel that what you said through your ads, through your conversations across channels, do they experience it. That helps you to build trust. And the more there is a connection between what you say and what you do, it shows a lot of transparency, and trust begins to build over time. Now, in crisis, how do you build transparency and trust? You can be vulnerable. You are not God. You are not superhuman. You are just like every other human being. You can even, your first step could have been the wrong step. It doesn't matter. What matters is, are you making effort? You can retract and say, oh, I didn't get this right, but this is what I have now learned on hindsight that I could have done differently. Come across as a human being. Don't come across like a bully. Don't come across like someone who is not subject to feedback, criticism, and all of that. The best of the persons, the best of brands are people and brands that have gone through the worst of challenges. And also to put it out here is that no business, no successful business can run without having challenges. It is impossible. You can't look at great brands, global brands, local brands. They will always have problems, challenges at intervals. What is it that matters? It's not the challenge. It is the fact that you are making effort to come out of it. And the process of coming out of it, be human, be kind, be empathetic, listen, and listen. And through these processes, you will build trust because people see you as a relatable person, not a demigod, not someone that knows it all. So my thinking is building transparency and trust. Do what you say. Let people experience it in the service you provide, in the product you provide. Let there be a correlation. That process is not necessarily a perfect process. You can start wrongly, but you can self-correct as you move on. That's my take on managing, building transparency and trust in the process of managing a challenge.
Thank you, Godfrey. Thank you so much. What comes to mind when you are talking, is you keep saying you keep it very simple. And so I'm going to take a cue from that and keep it simple to communicate, pass across the message. My understanding of what you've said is that the taste of the pudding is in the eating. So do the cooking and let your stakeholder do the eating. And therefore, from then, they can begin to give you their feedback and all that. So you talked about transparency and trust, and for you, it's in the doing. Do what you say. Don't promise what you cannot do, and whatever promises you've made, try and keep those promises. That's it. It couldn't have been better put. From the chat box, Martin Sadebote says the reality we find out is that when in a crisis, most companies are very defensive rather than transparent. Most communication ministers in Nigeria are very shy of the truth. He's asking, why is this so? But that's not a question for the panelists, just to bring it up for our we keep it at the back of our minds. But from the question Q&A session, I see that some people are asking questions as anonymous attendees. Please send your question with your name. It will help everybody. Thank you. Benedict Were, has a question for us. He says, most companies neglect the plight and needs of communication expertise in senior management. So how do you, for example, support an organization to reduce the offensiveness of a crisis emanating from, for example, corrupt practices or senior management? How do you report such issues to authorities without injuring your brand or your organization if you are the brand custodian? So he didn't mention anybody, but I will just ask to Adedoyin, let's hear your thoughts on this.
There's a lot to say on this particular thing, because again, we must remember that the work that we're doing, we have professional ethics around what we are doing. And you must be able to, how they say, speak truth to power. And you must be confident enough to say what needs to be said, irrespective of the consequences. So I think for me, if you're in an organization where there are corrupt practices, personally, I will ask myself, do I want to be in this situation? And how do I get myself out of it? Because you can't salvage a situation that is this horrible. If, for example, there's corruption, there's a lot of things going on. So I don't know about, flagging and reporting to the authorities, but you have to give the best counsel in that situation and then make sure that your professional integrity, you're staying by the ethics, you're not doing anything unethical with that kind of situation. What I've seen with people that maybe they're adopting corrupt practices, for them to even listen at that point, it's almost like it's too late. Maybe I'm wrong. So for me, I don't have the perfect answer, but I would think about my professional ethics, give my counsel, and get myself out of that situation, basically.
Thank you, Adedoyin. Njideka, do you want to add to that? Any thoughts?
I think really for me, what I would think about is the reputation in general. So I already know that the organization has a terrible precedent that it's following. So like Adedoyin said, I would definitely think about the reputation that the organization not just have, but also the one that I'm also trying to build for myself. So if it looks like the organization it's not ready to maybe rebuild their reputation or even work on ensuring that they follow the ethics, then I would definitely just advise and then find myself out as well. Because my reputation is at stake and goodwill, you don't want to lose that goodwill within an organization.
Thank you. Now, because Godfrey, you asked or you made a comment, or rather your last response was on trust, building trust in communication. So I'll throw the next question to you. It's from Theophilus NM. And he is asking, what's the best way to communicate grievances to your organization without sounding confrontational? Remember, this is being responsive. This employee is not carrying out a protest on the streets, or is not going to social media to address the organization and to tear it down and all that. So within the organization, he or she wants to be responsive by saying to people within the organization, I have this issue and so on and so forth. So how, in your opinion, what's the best way to communicate these grievances without sounding confrontational?
Okay, I'll be direct to say it's possible not to sound confrontational and have the most complex conversation in all honesty and good intentions. You need to come across to people first as an individual. Are you the calm type? Are you the brash type? And you must begin to bring your personality into the job that you do. I don't know, but I think that to a large extent, this job makes you to be the calm person. If you want to stay long on the job, be the calm person. Don't be the brash person. Be the person. When I started by saying that, understand the operations of your organization, like in depth. You don't need to become the subject matter expert, but have an idea of what goes on. When you do that, and a comms person is one person that is a bridge builder. In organizations, there are people that don't see eye to eye, team to team, in teams. But you, the comms person, you do not have the privilege to be that because you are supposed to be a bridge builder. When you have these qualities as a person, again, you don't develop them in one day. It takes time for you to evolve to this kind of person that I just described. And again, nobody is perfect in all of this. What this leads to is that there is a tendency for you to be seen as a solution provider, as someone that people can go to for advisory. I have had instances where colleagues walk up to me to say, I have just been spoken to in a way that I feel uncomfortable. And we walk up to that person. You don't even go to that person to discuss maybe the issue that has been reported. Check on that person. play some kind of psychology. Just have neutral conversation. And maybe at the end of the day now say, by the way, this feedback came to me about how you handle this. Can we do this differently? And always give people the implication of what is at stake. The implication is your reputation of what you are doing puts all of us at risk, in the sense that if I flip it back to the response that Adedoyin gave, where there's some kind of unethical practices, the truth is, if we all get into unethical practices, one of the things that we do is we will kill the business. And when we kill the business, it means we're all out of jobs. So no matter the wealth you have acquired, it doesn't stay forever. So why don't we do the right thing? We might not blow, might not become rich all of a sudden, but we'll have a dignified, decent life that is sustainable for a very long time. So dealing with such colleagues, I would say, it begins with you. Are you the calm person? Do they see you as a solution provider? Do they respect you? If you have all of these indices checked, maybe not 100%, there is nobody you cannot go to. And when you go to people, do not go to them like for like you don't use fire to quench fire. You use water to quench fire. Sometimes you can ignite. There are people that could be weak, and so you inspire them. We live in an environment where there are different dynamics playing out. There are personal issues. There are all sorts of issues. There are commuting issues. There are economic issues. So there is every reason for people to act the way they do. But a calm person must be that person that has conquered himself or herself, that in the midst of all these movie dynamics, you can be a calm person and advise people adequately. Again, you are not a perfect person, but you are just someone that can be trusted and handle complexity in the most seamless of ways. That's my take.
Thank you, Godfrey. I recall a course we took back then. I think it's on strategic conversations, if I remember correctly. So this speaks to that. How do we, pass across our grievances without being confrontational? But basically, what I would also add to what Godfrey has said is to follow the company's laid down procedures. Most companies will have rules, regular policies and processes by which you can, without being insulting, without being aggressive, overly aggressive, you can communicate your grievances to your superior or to your superior if you can't do to your superior. If your superior is a problem, you may need to go a step ahead, But I want to talk about dialogue. How does responsive communication, I want to begin with Njideka on this. How does responsive communication, during crisis contribute to organizations, showing resilience and adaptability? In other words, how would your being responsive contribute to your coming out of a crisis as quickly as possible? That's another way of looking at it.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
I say, how does a responsive communication approach during crisis contribute to resilience and adaptability for the organization? Mm-hmm. In other words, how does responsive communication aid an organization to survive a crisis period?
Okay, I think that it all boils down again to, being transparent, and also being clear in what it is that you have issued out. That's the crisis communication plan. I also think that it helps you go a long way, right? Because the feedback that you're going to get is also going to help you define or help build build a reputation. Help build the reputation of the organization. I don't know if I'm communicating that clearly. Yes, because I'm not sure I'm communicating that clearly. But I think that it boils down to transparency. It boils down to how clear your communication is. And it also shows the key stakeholders that you respect them enough to let them know that this is what is on ground. These are the measures that you're taking to ensure that this crisis does not happen again.
Okay, Thank you. Before we go too far, which we have done, you know, we have done very great in terms of time and the span we've been able to cover, the ground we've been able to cover. So I would like us not to leave without taking a look at metrics. You know, how do we measure our communication and all that? So are they doing traditional key performance indicators, KPIs, often fail to capture the full impact of communication initiatives. I'm sure most of us here agree with that. So what metrics would you suggest that executives should focus on to measure success in this regard?
Thank you, Emeka. So if we're going to look at the qualitative measures, I think it's important to be able to measure actual behavior change and understanding and adoption of messaging. Yes, those are a bit tricky to measure because when I bring this up, it's like, how do we measure that? It takes time, but it allows you to know if your messaging is effective, if it resonates. And if you look at dimensions of brand equity, resonance is a part of it, and perception is also a part of it. So you want to look at, is it resonating with my stakeholders, with my target audience? You also want to understand what their perception is, because it's one thing for your organization to say, this is who we are and this is how we behave. But it's another thing when you go and speak to your stakeholders, the audience, and you find, oh, they have a totally different perception. So I think that those are things we need to be looking at, those indices, those metrics. How are people assimilating and understand? Do they even understand the message that we're passing across to them? Are they adopting? So if your adoption on behavior change, rather, it's usually in the context of development organizations, but even for corporate organizations as well. What do you want people to see, feel, and how do you want them to act when they receive your messaging? And are they doing that? So those are some of the things that I would advise that we layer on. The traditional metrics, I will not say that they're not completely ineffective, but it's how do we use them strategically in combination with these qualitative metrics to make sure that we're actually measuring success and we're moving the needle, as they will say, in terms of what we want to achieve.
Yeah, thank you, Adedoyin. So in communicating, we set our goals and objectives and all that, and then we ask ourselves, have we succeeded? That's essentially what Adedoyin is saying. Resonance, what we set out to make people see, make people feel, make people do or believe. Did we succeed? And that brings us to the question of perception, brand perception. And I want to share this with Godfrey before I come to Njideka. How can an organization gauge stakeholder brand perception and sentiment? Are there tools and surveys that effectively assess how communication efforts influence public opinion? You can share this with us as you answer, as you address the question.
Okay, let me use a personal example where I work. The better part of last year, there were so many challenges not within your control. And so key decisions had to be taken, like very strong decisions and also understand that in the space you play, there were people who could not withstand the challenges of the environment. And so there were decisions that for them, we will shut operation, we will exit the market. And of course, I'm not going to deny that where I work was not in the news in terms of their living. You just wake up, your WhatsApp, everybody has sent you a viral video of you are exiting the market. You get to the office, everybody's breathing down on your neck. Godfrey, what do we do? How do we change this narrative? And to be honest, I didn't have the answer, and I didn't claim to anybody that we're going to turn this around. So the first thing I did was stay calm, breathe as much as you can, and take very procedural steps. What are the steps? Number one, we ask ourselves internally the question, are we living? That's what we did to ourselves. Are we living? And the first response was, we are not. we've got a good business, we've got a great environment with so much opportunities that are greater than the challenges in the same environment. Having answered that question, the next thing was, okay, what do we do to let people know that we are not leaving? We never went to respond to anyone on any channel wherever that information went out. We never did that, either in private or in public. We didn't have to beg anybody. We focused purely on our operations. You do this, you do that. And internally, we're tracking. And at the end of the day, we saw that our numbers were coming up. Performance. We're a listed company, so every quarter we will publish our performance. At the end of the day, to cut the long story short, you answer the question that is a trigger of what is making sensational news, of why the negative perception. So you answer that question internally, probe yourself, demand accountability from yourself. Whatever your response is, you guys provide solutions to say, what can we do to move the needle? For us, first, we focus on our operation to say, what are the opportunities? Where do we have strength? Where are we weak? So we improve on those places. Where are we so strong? We dial up our strength. At the end of the day, the numbers were adding up. And so we didn't have to call anybody to say, come and see. Like I said, we're publicly listed. And so every 90 days, we'll go and publish our results. Not every company is publicly listed. But when they see you, 6 months, you are still here. 1 year, you are still here. By themselves, the same people that wrote that, you are this, you are that, they will also write the reality of what you have become as an organization. That was one step. There were steps of, like Adedoyin mentioned at some point in the conversation, we identified our stakeholders, internal, community, government, trade association, and we had a narrative for each person. No two stakeholders are the same, and no two stakeholders are likely going to provide same solution to you. Every stakeholder is important to you, but the value you need for them is different. So we went to every stakeholder with a narrative of the support we need from them, but we created a conversation, a narrative document like a slide, and we shared it with all our spokespersons. Wherever you find yourself, say this, stay on this. If you are asked this question, this is your response. At the end of the day, when we were invited to a dinner during the Ramadan fast with the president to say we should come along other CEOs to break fast, I was not in the room where the conversation happened, but I went with my CEO. When he came out, he called me and said, Godfrey, I was the only CEO from our sector and the first CEO to be called upon to give a response from the private sector on what we are doing. That didn't come about overnight. It came about by engaging stakeholders, putting our narrative in where we think it matters. And at the end of the day, when he was called, we didn't lobby to say, call us. They by themselves called us. So in turning the narrative, ask yourself the naked question: what they are saying about us, is it true? If it is true, what is our intention? What is our way out of this? Begin to take that steps. Do not be brash, be methodic, do self-check, and begin to follow through. And at the end of the day, also engage internal and external with your narrative. Let people know what they should say and what they cannot say. By the time all of us start having this conversation, it's like a puzzle. It will come together and form a shape that everybody can be proud of. In the end, we're here.
Yeah.
In the end, we're to create value.
Yeah, Godfrey.
In the end, we're to support people.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to go to the chat box again so that we can take from our participants. You know, and an interesting question from Kingsley in Kemneme. He's talking about the tariff, the hike in tariff, you know, for electricity recently. According to him, it was done with such short notice and has led to a lack of trust between the discos and their customers, and in the face of an already fragile relationship. So Kingsley is asking, how do communication professionals in the power sector manage a scenario such as that as it relates to being responsive and not reactive? Can any, okay, let's begin with, I'll just ask Adedoyin this one very briefly, since we have very limited time now, very briefly, so we can move to other questions and other panelists. Thank you, Adedoyin.
Okay, so should I answer this question?
Yes, please.
Perspective that they have not yet made the announcement, because whatever you do now is being reactive. But let me just my approach. And this is what I was saying about thinking about things from end to end. You want to bring an increase of, I can't remember how many percentage it is, but very, very significant. And the context of the economic situation in the country, you have to engage your stakeholders, the customers, and inform them, first of all, this is what we are thinking, get feedback, dialogue. We were talking about dialogue, for example. And then if you want to implement this thing, okay, what time frame, so that you give Nigerians time to adjust. A lot is going on in the life of a Nigerian right now. Give them time to adjust and then communicate why this is necessary. Because I read it somewhere that they're saying that government is subsidizing electricity and all of that. Then put out fact sheets, information over the period of time to get people to understand. Promote alternative source of electricity to help people bring down their electricity bill, but do all of that within a time frame, not just wake up one morning and say, hey guys, you know. So that's what I would say in a nutshell.
Yeah, I cannot help but agree with that. Now, Ikene Liaku was here. I see a question from him. He was here before as a panelist, incidentally, and he's a NIPR president and you know, chairman of the governing council. He's asking that when it comes to the public sector, beyond just a private organization, how would we, you know, help to you know, ensure that the private sector helps in being responsive with their reactions? That the usual thing with their messages, sorry, that the usual thing out there is that they are violent in their communication, and they are violent because most times they are being reactive. So Ike is asking, how does the communicator in the public sector help to influence responsive leadership that enhances trust and promotes development? I will throw that to Njideka very briefly. Can you attempt an answer to that?
That is a rather interesting question. I would like to ask if Godfrey can answer, then I can add to that.
Okay, Godfrey, briefly.
Okay. Again, I'll drill it down to your personality. A comms person, you don't know it all, but come across and demonstrate capacity and capability. If you associate with government, government is very volatile, convoluted, and complex. But what will make the difference is your personality, and it's not going to happen overnight. Again, I trade back to understand the operation so that when you speak from what is relevant to people. In parastatals, there are DGs, there are leaders who don't come to the office until 11 a.m. When you go there, you will not see their staff until at about when they know it's 30 minutes for the boss to come. But imagine you begin to take simple steps like work resumes at 8 a.m. You're on your decks by 8 a.m. Whether your staff are complying or not, over time they will. So when you begin to position yourself like you are different, you are not desperate, you are here to add value. Do not fight the operations fire for fire, because you will be worn out. You cannot defeat government. You can only absorb, understand what is it that is possible here, and bring your professional capability and competence to begin to advise from inside. And again, I will say, throw the implications to them. There are sectors in the government that are enviable today in the approach they have taken to engage stakeholders, internal and external. There are also some that are opposite. The question is, if you look at it, there is a personality influence that comes to bear It takes time, but it's possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think it was Adedoyi that talked about communicating hope earlier. And I think that speaks to the responses you've given us, Godfrey, and to the issues or questions that Ike Neliako has raised. If we aim at communicating hope, then we will not be as violent in our communication at all. So it's about hope, it's about being responsible in our communication and understanding that our job really is to make things easier for the next person through what we do as communicators. I have Caroline Strolanke, and she is asking, how do we build the trust so that employees can engage in the tools and organization sets in place? In other words, you have an organization, you have your IT department, everybody is top-notch in terms of the tools they've deployed to the organization. How do you then build trust among employees enough such that they engage with those tools? They make those tools effective. They use those tools as they ought to. Adedoyin, would you want to attempt a response to that?
Okay, I'll try. So I think the starting point is, are you truly appreciating your employees? Are they engaged? Because you can't just bring these so-called tools and the organization culture is oppressive, is limiting, and then you just expect them. It has to be a nurturing. So it starts with, what culture are we trying to build here? Are we truly listening? So you want to listen to them. You also want to make sure that you're speaking or addressing to whatever their motivation is, because for a lot of people, it's not just about the money. That's not just the reason why they're working with you. Are you speaking to their motivations? Are you enabling them? Do they really feel empowered by your organization? Are you carrying them along? These tools, why are they important? Are you even getting their feedback and their suggestions and implementing it? You have to take your employees on a journey. Sometimes we just give them orders, do this for the sake of, our management, but you're not even getting their input. So start with that. When you then have the tools that you want them to engage with, if you've not been doing it before and you want to start with, do a town hall, do something, do a survey, and then actually listen, take the feedback and take an action and let them say like, okay, they're listening to us, and then you can take it from there going forward.
Thank you. I see a question that Oyinloluwa Alalade is asking, that in his company, they have mapped their stakeholders and they are quite wide, but they can't reach them using the same channels, just like we've mentioned here. One channel does not fit everybody. But his question is that there are only 3 members they are in the comms team, so they are very small. What would you recommend they can do in this instance? I'm asking the question to Adedoyin because I see that you gave an answer in the chat. So could you give that answer publicly? Thank you.
Want me to give a very, very long speech?
No, nothing long. I'm not sure the audience could see your response.
Oh, right. Okay. So I was essentially saying that this is a situation that a lot of communications professionals face, being under-resourced, being the one to handle so many big things, and you're not given the resources that you want. However, like Godfrey has said, organizations exist to make profits, and you cannot make an emotional decision or emotional request. You have to be able to go to your leadership and advocate and ask for the resources and hands that you need. And how do you do that? Make your presentation backed by data, backed by facts, and backed by results. So if you tell them that with the number of people we have, this is what we've been able to do. But if we have this X number of people who are qualified in these areas outside of the creative team, we'll be able to achieve so much more. Show them what they're losing by not properly resourcing the communications team. Don't be emotional about it. Come with your facts, come with your results, and hopefully they're the kinds that listen and they take action on what you're advocating for.
Thank you so much. We are very close, but I cannot help but ask this last question. It's beautiful. From Khadija Lawal. How can an organization which has already refuted a claim, you've said we didn't do this in the public, for instance, we're not guilty, for instance, how can you then come out to admit that incident really happened when you have found the truth? What's your take on that? This can go around to all the panelists very briefly. Let's begin with Godfrey. What do you think?
Okay. Again, the reason why we are human beings is we're not perfect. You might not go and verbatim say oh, this happened, we're wrong. But you can contextualize it. As at the time we made this was based on available facts and information. And so we shared it at that level. However, contrary information and evidence have now shown this. So you take it through the route of scientific evidence. So you are communicating what is before all of us. And the place of also now showing that your commitment to being transparent is the reason why you came back to share this update as a follow-up is something not to be ashamed of. And you close it by saying that we're taking further steps, learning from hindsight and insight to ensure that more precautions are put in place to avoid such incidences.
Thank you. Excellent and brilliant. Does anybody want to add to that, Judeka or Adedoyin?
I thought that was a very brilliant response.
Okay, thank you. Indeed, it was, I mean, come out and admit it as, and then move on from there. It's about integrity. It's about open communication, openness, and all that. So thank you, Godfrey. Thank you so much. So I am going to say thank you to the panelists. I'm also going to say thank you to our participants. At some point, there were about 97 people or so on the call. And I think we are down to 88, if I'm correct, but it's a good number. So thank you for your active participation. And for now, this is all we can take. But before we go, in just 1 minute, I'd like each of the panelists to give us their final thoughts on communication leadership, moving from reactive communication to responsive communication. Again, let's begin with the lady with the first A in her name. Adedoyin, your name begins with an A, so that's why so begin from Adedoyin. Go ahead.
I'll take it. I'm always the first, so I'll take it. I think really to wrap up, because I know we've said a lot, there's been a lot of takeaways, it's for us to truly be the strategic professionals and trusted advisors that we are. Because as we learn all of these things, if we cannot give counsel to business leaders, organizational leaders, if you cannot say this is the right thing to do, if we cannot own what we know, then there's truly all these things we've heard. It's just like we just came to listen and go away. So I really encourage us to think about the context of our organization. Am I providing the best strategic advice and counsel that I can provide with organization? And then begin to work together collaboratively with other departments within your organization to ensure that you continue to maintain that reputational trust that's very important.
Thank you so much. Godfrey, your final thoughts in 1 minute?
I'll say, let's keep learning because there's no end to it. Let's stay humble. Let's be strategic. And the last but not the least, let's have fun while working. Let's not be plastic. We are humans and we also deserve to be pampered. So make it a joyful ride in your course of doing the job.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Njideka, let's have your final thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, so something that really resonates with me is Warren Buffett's statement. He said, we would rather lose lots of money than a strand of our reputation. So that's one thing that you should really think about when you are, as communication leaders. You also need to think about being transparent, because transparent also shows your stakeholders that you really respect them enough to be able to communicate what is happening within the organization.
Yeah. Respect for your stakeholders. Respect enough to communicate what is happening in the organization. So we've gone through, the gamut of, from the beginning to the end. We've done a lot in terms of discussing what it means to be reactive and to be responsive. We've seen when being reactive does not work. It means firefighting. It means attending to issues after they have happened. And we've seen what it means to be responsive, which means you're being proactive. And that also means being transparent in your communication. It means building trust. It helps to build trust with your audience and with your stakeholders. So thank you so much to the panelists, and thank you so much to the participants. They've been very active with the chat group, the chat box, and I'm very active with the Q&As. I think we largely tried to answer most of the questions. If there is one or two that we didn't answer, it was unintentional, so please forgive us. But thank you for your active participation. And I'm hoping that we've been able to take away a few things to understand and to put into practice as we move going forward. The need for us to work from the future, from a place in the future, to look back from that future place as we communicate. You know, that's what being responsive is about. It's about adaptability too. So thank you so much. I want to end by thanking the panelists, by thanking the participants, and then by also saying thank you, especially to all IABC members who are online from Africa, from Asia Pacific, from Europe, North America, and so on and so forth. And of course, the hosts, West Africa, IABC region. Thank you all very, very well. It's been my pleasure to be your host or your moderator, your moderator. Thank you. And have a wonderful evening, wonderful morning, wonderful day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you.